This video is going to show you how to make your drawstring bag from your Sew Your Own Reusables kit. Okay, you might also have the download that you can print at home that doesn't come with all the fabric, but and you can use this video to follow along with it too and help you with your sewing. But this is your kit when you get it. It comes in a cardboard box, sticker on the front, shows you which one you're going to be making. This one, as you will see, the pineapples. Now I like it to be all neatly packaged up, as you might be giving this as a gift. So we'll just undo, very gently, undo the washi tape. Okay, and here we have it, okay? So we'll take the business card out. Okay, so this is your cotton twill tape. This is what you'll be using for your drawstring, to pull the drawstring. It's cotton because it's a natural product and you can wash it easily. So you have that. You have your pieces of fabric which is all pre-cut. You have the right amount of fabric that you need. 2 plain and 2 patterned. And I also put them right sides together because that just helps you in your sewing, because things have got to be right sides together so that when you turn them the right way round, they are the right way round. Okay, you get this is your care instructions, so that it tells you how to wash it when you're finished with it, and you also get a pre-printed set of full instructions with photographs as well. So let's get on with our sewing. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is we have to mark on our fabric where we're going to leave the opening for the casing, so that the twill tape will go through and be able to pull your drawstring. So I have a cutting mat which has markings already on it. You can do this with a ruler if you haven't got a cutting mat. Okay, so the first thing I do is I make a mark at 1 inch and at 2 inches. 1 inch, 2 inches. So that leaves an inch gap. Okay, so then we'll do it again with our plain fabric at 1 inch and at 2 inches. 1 inch, 2 inches. Okay, now we need to take them over to the sewing machine to sew them. You'll notice that I haven't clipped them. You can clip them, pin them round. I'm so used to doing this that I have a tendency to just kind of go freestyle without clipping. But for security, if you want to do it, you can clip. Okay? Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine. I've got my fabric. I've marked it up to the 1/2 inch, 4/8 of an inch line. I've dropped my needle in. I'm going to do a little stitch forward, a little stitch backward just to secure it. Okay, so now here's the trick. You sew down. Okay, you can hand crank if you want a little bit as well, just to make sure it's neat. Down to that first mark, that 1 inch mark. Okay, I'll do a little back stitch. Go forwards. Okay, and then I'm going to take my needle out and my thread out. Okay, I'm just going to leave that thread hanging. That's what I tend to do. Then I'm going to pop it back in, the needle back in at that second mark. Forward, backwards and forwards. So you've left a gap for your casing. Okay, so I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch, seam allowance. Okay, I'm using a straight stitch around about 2.75 millimeters. Okay, there we go. Another 1/2 inch and up the other side. stop at that mark again. Little back stitch, okay, lift the presser foot to the next mark, back stitch, and off the edge. I'm just going to trim my threads. I never bother trimming these threads here. They kind of just stay out of the way. So what you end up with is a little hole. Okay, so now you have to do that with your plain fabric too. Try not to pull too much thread out. Okay, 1/2 inch, go along the bottom. Half an inch, seam allowance. Sew up the other side. Stop at that mark with a back stitch. Drop it back to that next mark, backward, forward, and there you are. Trim your threads and you're good to go. Okay, whatever you do, don't sew the top. You have got to keep your top open so that you can fit it all together. Okay, now we're going to box out the corners. So, to box out your corners, this is the method I use. I get one of the corners of my fabric which I've sewn together, okay, and feeling with my fingers, I press them together and I turn them into a little triangle, and you can really feel where the seam meets up. Okay, I iron it, I get a ruler and I measure a line that's 3 inches from the top. Okay, so that's not quite 3 inches from the top, that's more like it. And I will make a mark across it so that I know where I'm sewing. And then I will get a needle, a pin, and I will pin it. Okay, let's do that again on the other side. Okay, so here's your corner. Here's your corner, okay, kind of flatten it out into a triangle. I'm going to feel my way to make it into that triangle and feel that the seams are even. Okay, iron it, get my ruler, measure 3 inches from the top of the 3 inches across, okay, and pin. Okay, then you just have to repeat it for your plain fabric. Okay, so now you simply have to just sew over that line, but because it's going to be a stress point, what I like to do is I like to do a little forward and back stitch at the start, sew over that line, and a little back stitch at the end. Okay, so you need to do that for all 4 of your corners. Okay, so now what you need to do, take out the pins, put them in your pin cushion, okay, and we need to neaten up these edges because we don't want these corners, because we don't want this excess fabric hanging about. Okay, so just get my scissors and I'm going to leave it with maybe a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, just do that on all our corners. My kids love these little bits, they call them hats. Okay, when they were small they used to take them and play with them for their dollies. Okay, so that's that. Now, these bits here, the openings for the casing. Okay, the best way to make it neat and easy to sew is if you iron them. If you iron them flat. Okay, so open up the seams and give it a good old iron on each seam. Okay. Okay, so what you want to do now is you want to take your patterned piece and turn it the right way round. Okay, so I'll poke out the corners. Okay, and you want to take your plain piece and you want to keep it with the wrong side facing out. Okay, and what you do next is you slip your patterned piece into your plain piece. Okay, and you want to match up your seams as best as you possibly can so that you can see it there, you can see the hole. Okay, and you want to pin this all the way around to the other side. Okay, and just get my clips. Okay. So we clip it. Okay, and we clip the edges. Okay, and then what we have to do is we have to clip it all the way around. And we must remember to leave a gap on one side so that we can turn it. Okay, so there's my gap. It's all neat. The you can see that the holes go right through. Okay, so we'll go over to the sewing machine and we will sew it. Okay, so we need to sew this and we need to remember to leave that gap. Okay, so what I'm going to do, as usual, 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to start at one end of where I'm leaving that gap. It's got to be a big enough gap that you can get your fingers in and you can reach down and pull the fabric out. Okay, so a little back stitch at the start. Take that pin out. What I sometimes do is I take that extra piece of what's it called, the flat arm, off my sewing machine. Okay, just to make it easier to go around. Okay, and when we get to the edge, we have to make sure that the fabric from the seam is neat and it doesn't bunch up, because that can cause problems. The casing, okay, so there we are, we're over one side. And again, make sure that the seams are lying flat and don't get bunched up. There we are. Okay, a little further. That's a good enough gap. Okay, and we pull it up. Okay, and I'm just going to leave that free arm off for the time being, and then we're going to go and turn our bag. Okay, so this is where we turn our bag. Okay, so we've got to find our gap, our turning gap. Okay, stick our hands in, our fingers, and very gently push the lining back out through that gap. Okay, so I'm going to get a bit squishy, a bit wibbly. Okay, and there you have it. So you've got a funny looking bit like that. So what you have to do is you have to push your lining back inside the bag. Whoops. Okay. So you kind of neaten up the edges. Okay, and now the turning gap, so give it a bit of a shake, a bit of a poke down, a bit of a poke out. Okay, and what we will next do is we will iron it. We'll iron the top. You kind of have to neaten up the edges, make sure they're pulled out properly. Okay, so we'll get our ironing board back. Okay, and just very gently, I like to iron it on the inside. Okay, so that when you turn it round you can really only just see the top. So the lining fabric should slightly lower down, very slightly. Okay, so I'm going to neaten them up here. Okay, turn it round, make sure they're pulled up properly so that all the fabric. Okay. Okay, so when you've ironed it, it's all looking neat. what we now need to do is we need to go and we need to top stitch it. Okay, so let's go back over to the sewing machine. Okay, so what I've done is I have changed the colour of my bobbin thread to match the colour of my lining. Okay, and I'm just starting at one of the edges where the casing hole is. Okay, and I'm just going to do a top stitch. Okay, so this is where the gap is. So I'm just going to make sure that it's all neat when I come to sew it. Okay, so I'm just going to trim my threads. Then we're going to do the exciting bit, which is working on sewing the casings. Okay. So I will go back to one of the sides where my casing is. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to sew at the top of my casing. Okay, so it's roughly about 1/4 inch down from where I did the top stitching. Okay, do a little back stitch, okay, and that's quite a good mark to follow as you go around. Okay, try and keep it as straight as you can. And we'll come to the other side. Okay, and we'll go over that seam. It's not a race. You are best to go, whoops, at a slowish pace. Okay, go back to where I started. Okay, take my needle out. Okay, and trim my threads. Okay, and we'll find the other side. Okay, and we'll start at the bottom of that casing. Now this is harder to keep in a straight line. Okay, but you'll see I've marked on my sewing machine where that line is, so I keep my eye on that. You might want to mark it with a little marker pen. It's roughly round about the edge of where my where the plate is. And I come to the other casing. Oh, bang on, bang on. There we are. Okay, back to the beginning. Trim my threads. And now all we have to do is thread the casing. Okay, so we've done our casing. We need to add in our tape so that we can pull it as a drawstring. Okay, I've already done one side. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do the other side. So this is where your safety pin comes in. You need to pin your tape at one end with your safety pin, okay? So we'll go to the side that hasn't been done yet, okay? And you very gently just slot it into the casing and simply work your way along, feeling the safety pin as you go. When you get to these bits here, when you get to the other side, the other casing, you have to be a bit careful because sometimes it might get stuck on the seam that's been folded over. It's quite a satisfying thing to do. Okay, just keep it push and pull as you go. Okay, so I'm going to get them so that they're the same length either side. Okay, and then all you do is tie a little knot in the end, and there you have it. If you want to make it really neat, before you thread it through, you could fold over the edge and sew just a little hem on the edge of it. Occasionally, you know, they've a tendency to fray slightly, but okay, ta-da! There you are. There is your drawstring bag.